Let's spend Thanksgiving at my mother's house this year. You're not invited. Cassandra said it so casually that, for a moment, I wondered if I'd misheard her. She stood beside Mark in my living room, one hand resting lightly on her designer coat, her expression composed in that glossy way she'd perfected. My son stared at the carpet like it might swallow him. I see. I kept my voice level as I folded the linen napkins I'd ironed for tomorrow's dinner. They would now stay tucked away, untouched. And is there a reason I'm not welcome this year? Cassandra brushed imaginary lint from her sleeve. We just want something intimate. Family only. Family only. As if I, Eleanor Hayes, the woman who raised Mark and adored 5-year-old Olivia, somehow didn't meet the qualification. Mark finally lifted his gaze, guilt tightening the lines around his mouth. Mom, it's just easier this way. With Cass's mom hosting and everything. I understand, I said softly. I didn't. But after they left with their polite little goodbyes, a strange stillness settled inside me. And here is the part for the first 30 seconds, include this line at the end, if you love real emotional stories, hit subscribe, we post one every day. I didn't spend the evening cooking a meal no one would eat. Instead, I opened my laptop. Buried in my inbox was an invitation I had declined out of habit, a private Thanksgiving night exhibition at the Lucent Gallery in New York, featuring the acclaimed photographer Adrian Cole, whose work I often analyzed on my modest art blog. He and I had begun exchanging messages about composition and symbolism, conversations I treasured more than I cared to admit. My cursor hovered over the event email. A bold, quiet voice inside me whispered, "Why shouldn't you go?" Within minutes, I'd typed my acceptance, booked a last-minute flight, and pulled a suitcase from the closet. Clothes I hadn't worn in years, too bright, too expressive for Cassandra's taste, found their way into the bag. I told no one. Not Mark, not Cassandra. I simply chose myself for once. The next morning, I boarded the plane feeling lighter than I had since my husband, Thomas, passed 5 years ago. New York welcomed me in a whirl of wind and possibility. My small boutique hotel overlooked a park shimmering with early holiday lights. Before heading to the gallery that evening, I studied my reflection, silver-streaked hair swept into soft waves, lipstick a daring shade I hadn't worn since my 40s, my grandmother's pearls resting against my collarbone. Not bad for 62, I thought. The Lucent Gallery buzzed with the hum of well-dressed guests. I hesitated at the entrance, just long enough for doubt to whisper, before someone stepped into my path. Ms. Hayes. His voice held warmth and a gentle British cadence. You came. Adrian Cole was taller than his portraits implied, with silver hair that seemed to catch the gallery lights and thoughtful eyes that saw far more than the surface. When he smiled, something inside me eased. I found myself unexpectedly free, I said. I'm glad you did, he replied, offering his hand. There are people I'd like you to meet. The evening unfolded like a long-forgotten dream. Adrian introduced me as someone whose insights had reshaped the way he considered architectural light. Critics and curators asked for my opinions, actually listened, and debated with me. For the first time in years, my voice didn't feel like an intrusion. During dinner, seated beside Adrian at a long candlelit table, he leaned closer. You write with such certainty, he said. But in your emails, you sound as though you're apologizing for existing. I laughed softly. I suppose I've spent years trying not to take up too much space. That's a shame, he murmured. You belong in rooms like these. Later, someone snapped a group photo in the studio above the gallery. Without thinking, I posted it online with the caption, New Inspiration with Adrian Cole in New York. Back in my hotel room, exhilarated, I finally looked at my phone, only to find a cascade of missed calls and anxious messages. Mark. Cassandra. Even Mark's mother-in-law. The last text made my breath catch. Mom, Olivia saw your photo and cried. She thought you'd be alone today. What do I even tell her? For the first time in a long while, guilt didn't win. I typed. Tell her Grandma saw something beautiful today because I wasn't invited to your dinner. Happy Thanksgiving. We'll talk after I'm home. The next morning, sunlight filled the room. New York felt like a clean page. At the front desk, a small envelope waited for me. If you're free at 11, I'm teaching a small workshop nearby. No pressure. Adrian. I went. The workshop wasn't about cameras, it was about attention. Seeing. Breathing. Being present. Adrian handed me a camera and encouraged me to wander the loft, capturing whatever drew my eye. For hours, I forgot everything except the play of light across concrete floors. When we finished, he said, keep the camera for the weekend. It suits you. I protested, he insisted, and then, unexpectedly, asked me to lunch. We found a small cafe between a bookstore and a record shop. As steam curled from our soup, Adrian said casually, your son called the gallery this morning. I nearly dropped my spoon. He did what? He wanted to confirm that you and I were actually together yesterday. He seemed unsettled. Mortification burned through me. I'm so sorry. No need, he said with an amused smile. It told me something important. What's that? That you've spent far too long convincing people who don't look closely that you're small. He held my gaze. You're not. Outside, the city bustled, bright and alive. Inside, I felt something shift, something long overdue. For the first time in years, I wasn't shrinking. I was becoming. Eleanor Hayes reread Adrian Cole's email twice before the words fully settled in. I hope your flight home was gentle. I meant what I said, your perspective has shifted something in mine. Let's continue the conversation when you're ready. Her cheeks warmed, not with embarrassment but with something she hadn't felt in years, anticipation. She set the laptop aside just as her living room door clicked softly. Mark stepped back inside, his expression hesitant. Sorry, he said, I forgot to ask, are you really okay? Truly. Eleanor nodded. I am. More than I expected. Mark exhaled, looking relieved in a way that made him seem boyish again. Good. I want us to do better. All of us. Then we will, she said simply. After he left, the apartment was quiet again, but it no longer felt like a silence pressing in on her. It felt open, waiting. She walked to her window and looked out at the November dusk settling over Chicago. Cars hummed on the street below, lights flicked on in neighboring buildings, and somewhere in the distance someone was laughing, big, unrestrained, joyful. Eleanor smiled. New York had shifted her, yes, but the truth was simpler. She had allowed herself to be shifted. The next few days unfolded with unexpected grace. On Wednesday, Mark arrived right on time. He didn't honk from the curb or rush inside to check his watch. He came up, knocked politely, and looked at her with genuine warmth. You look good, Mom, he said as she slipped on her coat. I feel good, she admitted. At his house, Cassandra greeted her with a smile that was tight but not hostile. For now, it was enough. Olivia barreled into her legs with the enthusiasm only a 5-year-old could summon. Grandma. Daddy said you took pictures in New York and saw skyscrapers and a man who takes pictures of castles. Eleanor laughed. Something like that. During dinner, she told stories, edited for a child's ears, about exploring Greenwich Village, about learning how to capture light, about pigeons who refused to cooperate for photographs. Mark watched her like someone seeing a familiar painting under new lighting. Cassandra remained quieter, but she didn't interrupt or correct or redirect. When Olivia asked if Grandma could come to her winter dance recital, Cassandra even said, of course. It was a small moment, but not insignificant. Later that night, back in her apartment, Eleanor poured herself a cup of chamomile tea and opened her laptop again. Adrian had already responded to her earlier thank you, send me one of your photos from the weekend. I'd like to see the world through your eye for a moment. She selected one, her favorite, taken in Washington Square Park. Not the famous arch, but the shadow of it stretching across the pavement, intersecting perfectly with the long silhouette of a lamppost. A tiny moment she'd noticed only because Adrian had taught her how to look. She attached the image with a short message, "Here's the one that stayed with me." His reply arrived 5 minutes later, "Eleanor, this composition is exquisite. When you're in New York in January, we'll go shooting together. The city has been waiting for you." She leaned back, touched by the sincerity in his words. For years she'd lived in service to others' comfort, quiet, small, careful. Now something new was opening. Not a romance, necessarily. Not yet. But an awakening. A reclaiming. Her phone buzzed again. A photo from Mark, Olivia brushing her teeth in fuzzy pajamas, waving a toothbrush like a magic wand. She wants to say goodnight. She says she's proud of you for going on an adventure. Eleanor's eyes stung. "Tell her I'm proud of her too," she typed back. "Good night, sweetheart." She set the phone aside and turned off the lights. The city outside glowed softly through her curtains. For the first time in a long time, she felt not like someone waiting for permission to exist, but like someone at the start of a road she'd never walked before. A road she'd chosen. And she was ready to see where it led. "The gallery felt strangely hollow without my perspective," Adrian had written. "When might New York see you again?" As I typed back, confirming my January visit, I glanced at the photograph now hanging above my desk, a lone wooden chair washed in shifting color, waiting for someone to claim it. For the first time in decades, I was answering that invitation on my own terms. December turned Chicago into a glittering snow globe, the air sharp with winter's confidence. I found myself moving through the holiday season with senses I hadn't realized had been sleeping. The lights along Michigan Avenue struck me as intentional artwork. The old facades I'd passed 1,000 times revealed details I'd never bothered to notice, a carved cornice here, a forgotten archway there. And with my new camera, a real one I'd bought after returning from New York, I began collecting moments instead of merely moving through them. Dinner with Mark, Cassandra, and Olivia, something I had quietly dreaded, went better than expected. Cassandra kept her distance, polite but chilly. Mark smoothed the edges with practiced calm. Olivia's bubbling excitement over my New York adventure managed to dissolve most of the tension. By the time dessert arrived, we'd established a weekly dinner tradition, a small but meaningful victory. Most surprising was the renewed connection with Olivia. Without Cassandra hovering, my granddaughter revealed herself to be wonderfully observant, with a natural eye for composition. On our first solo outing, she tugged my sleeve and pointed to frost spirals on a shop window. "Grandma, look. It's like one of your pictures." Mark had dug out an old digital camera for her, and soon our Saturday morning photo walks became sacred. Just 2 hours, just us, in different Chicago neighborhoods, capturing whatever caught our curiosity. "You know what I like about taking pictures?" she asked one morning, face framed by her wool hat. "Nobody can tell you you're seeing wrong. If something looks beautiful to me, I can take a picture. And that makes it mine." Her earnestness often left me speechless. Meanwhile, my correspondence with Adrian continued daily, sometimes quick notes between classes and shoots, sometimes long video calls that stretched toward midnight. We navigated this growing connection cautiously, neither of us eager to pin a label on something that felt more expansive than that. "Labels are for museum plaques," he said once. "Not people." His ease gave me room to discover who I was at 63, not as a title or role, but as Eleanor. Just Eleanor. Not everyone appreciated this transformation. "You've changed," Cassandra's mother, Judith, observed when I ran into her while shopping for a winter coat. She examined the burgundy wool sleeve with her usual cool precision. Bold choice. Special occasion? No. I just like the color. Her eyebrow lifted. I heard you're flying back to New York for that photographer's exhibition. Cassandra's concerned. Of course she was. She worries you're experimenting with things that won't last. I almost laughed. Is that what it's called at my age, trying something new? Don't be glib. She leaned closer. We're thinking of Olivia. We don't want her hurt. Olivia is attached to me, I said calmly. Whatever happens with Adrian doesn't change that. Friendship, she repeated, a sharp edge to the word. I met her gaze evenly. People involved decide what to call it, Judith. Not the peanut gallery. I picked up the coat. And I'm buying this. As I walked away, she murmured, your late husband wouldn't recognize you. Strangely, it didn't wound. It felt true, and freeing. The woman Edmund had loved was earnest, devoted, and hesitant to take up space. I had outgrown that version of myself. And knowing him, he'd have applauded it. The night before my January flight, Mark and Olivia came for dinner. Cassandra excused herself, work, again, but the evening was quiet and pleasant. Olivia handed me a wrapped package. It's for your trip, she said with solemn pride. Inside was a handmade book titled Grandma Eleanor's Big Adventure. Each page held photos we'd taken together and her charming illustrations. So you don't forget us when you're with your camera friend, she whispered. I hugged her tight. Sweetheart, I couldn't forget you. After she fell asleep on my couch, Mark and I cleaned the kitchen in comfortable silence. She worked on that book for weeks, he said. She wanted you to have something to show him. It's perfect, I managed, voice thick. Mark dried his hands. Mom, about Cassandra. I braced myself. We've been in counseling. Real counseling, someone neutral. It's made her realize that she grew up thinking love meant control. Her parents modeled that. She's trying to change. I absorbed this slowly. Change takes time. Yes. But watching you change. It's affected her. And me. After they left, I finished packing with a quiet sense of forward motion. New York awaited, Adrian awaited, but the biggest shift had already happened. I had changed. That night I dreamed of Edmund, not the frail, fading version from my usual nightmares, but the vibrant man I married. He stood beside an endless road and smiled. You're doing fine, Eleanor. I woke with damp cheeks and a lightness I hadn't felt in years. On the plane the next morning, I opened Olivia's book. On the last page, she'd drawn me standing beside a tall figure labeled cameraman, both of us beaming. Underneath, Grandma Eleanor's not invisible anymore. Children rarely miss the truth. New York welcomed me with gusty winds and steel gray skies. Adrian met me at the airport himself, easily spotted above the crowd. Welcome back, he said, taking my suitcase with one hand and brushing my shoulder with the other, simple, warm, unforced. The Prisma Gallery had arranged for a boutique hotel nearby, a thoughtful gesture I didn't take lightly. As we drove through traffic, he updated me on the exhibition schedule, the final lighting adjustments, the nerves he tried to pretend he didn't have. The lighting goes in tonight, he said. I'd like your eye on it, if you're not exhausted. I'd love to. The gallery after hours felt alive. Ladders, cables, crews in jeans instead of sleek black. Adrian introduced me not as a guest but as someone whose input mattered. Eleanor's understanding of spatial light has shaped much of this collection, he said to his curator, a sharp, stylish woman named Serena, who immediately regarded me with newfound respect. For hours we adjusted frames, discussed angles, debated the flow of the rooms. And my opinions were not humored, they were used. By midnight, Adrian noticed my energy fading and arranged a car. "Tomorrow begins the madness," he said softly. Back in my room, a small package awaited, a vintage book on early architectural photography. Inside, a note, for the woman who taught me to see differently. I fell asleep with the book in my hands. Morning came with a drawing from Olivia, stick figures at a gallery opening, tiny wine glasses included. "Good luck today, Grandma." The preview began at 4 p.m., but Adrian invited me early. The gallery gleamed. He was adjusting a spotlight when I entered. "What do you think?" he called without turning. I walked slowly through the space, letting the full weight of the collection wash over me. Forgotten light, structures abandoned by people but still claimed by time, felt like a metaphor for both of us. And for the first time in years, I realized I wasn't stepping into anyone else's life. I was stepping fully into my own. Observatories, cathedrals, lighthouses, and old theaters filled the gallery walls, structures captured not at their most pristine, but at the exact second natural light revealed something sacred in their decay. I stood there in silence, taking in the images. "It's remarkable," I said at last. "You've made what's missing feel alive." Adrian turned toward me, the softest shift in his expression acknowledging the weight of my words. "That's exactly what I'm chasing," he replied. Our eyes held just long enough to communicate something neither of us dared say aloud. Then the doors opened, ushering in New York's art world, and our quiet understanding dissolved beneath the swirl of introductions, camera flashes, and polished small talk. What surprised me most was how Adrian insisted on bringing me into each conversation, not as a guest, not as an afterthought, but as a partner in the intellectual work behind the exhibition. "Eleanor changed how I approached abandoned sacred spaces," he told one critic, directing her toward an image of sunbeams knifing through a collapsed dome. Again and again, he referenced our conversations, my notes, my ideas. To my astonishment, several journalists asked for my contact information. A gallery owner from Baltimore hinted at wanting me to write an essay for an upcoming exhibition. And Lena, the curator who first welcomed me into the gallery, suggested I consider consulting more formally. "Quite the debut," Adrian murmured later, after the final guests left and the gallery fell into that rare, hushed state large rooms have only after crowds depart. "How does it feel to be discovered at your age?" I laughed, flushed from the evening, and perhaps the champagne. "Like someone finally handed me the right size of my own life." His smile softened in a way that made my heart flip, quiet and certain. "Come," he said, his voice low. "Let's celebrate somewhere we can actually talk." Somewhere turned out to be his loft above the gallery, industrial bones softened by warm lighting, shelves overflowing with travel-worn books, and prints never meant for public display. "You live up here?" I asked, taking in the exposed brick and mismatched armchairs. "Bought the building years ago." The gallery came first. "This," he gestured to the space. "This is where I breathe." I moved to a series of black and white prints pinned to the wall. Unlike his public work, these were stripped bare, no dramatic compositions, no perfect symmetry, just quiet landscapes holding the imprint of human absence. "These feel private," I said. "They are." He joined me, voice softer than before. "Photography started as a language I didn't share with anyone. Showing these to you, it isn't something I do lightly." My throat tightened. "Why me?" He set down his glass without breaking eye contact. "Because you see in layers. Because you listen past the surface. Because," he exhaled, almost laughing at himself. "Because I want you to know who I am when no one is watching." For months, we'd existed in a space between definitions, curiosity, pull, restraint, the unmistakable hum of something growing. His honesty cracked something open. "I want that too," I whispered. "To know you. And be known." When he kissed me, it wasn't hesitant or rushed. It was deliberate, unhurried, a man choosing connection, not performance. Later, as we lay together under the muted glow of the city, I felt a clarity I hadn't known in years. At 63, I wasn't shrinking. I was expanding. "What's on your mind?" Adrian asked, fingertips tracing my shoulder. "That I've spent most of my life being careful," I said. "Careful not to want too much or take up too much space. And now I'm learning how to stop apologizing for existing." The smile he gave me was nothing like the one he used on critics and donors. This one was just for me. "Eleanor," he murmured, pulling me close, "this version of you is extraordinary." My phone buzzed, a text from Mark. "How was the opening? Olivia wants to know if your pictures were a hit." "You two talk often," Adrian noted. "We're rebuilding," I said. "Slowly. Honestly." "And Cassandra?" I sighed. "She's adjusting to the idea that I'm not manageable anymore." He kissed my temple. "Good." I fell asleep beside him, wondering how life had twisted so unexpectedly, and so beautifully, from that painful Thanksgiving rejection to this moment. Strange how closed doors sometimes push us exactly where we needed to go. The next evening, the public opening turned the gallery into a crush of people. I stood off to the side, watching Adrian glide through conversations with graceful efficiency. "He's different with you here," Lena said, appearing beside me with 2 champagne glasses. "He looks the same to me," I replied. "That's my point," she said with a knowing smile. "He usually performs. Tonight he's grounded. He keeps checking that you're still in the room." I hadn't noticed, but now I caught him glancing over, eyes warming when they met mine. Before I could respond, a commotion rippled through the entrance. A television crew swept in, led by a poised woman in a crimson dress whose confidence cut through the crowd like a blade. "Fantastic," Lena muttered. "Raina Wolf. Brace yourself." "Problem. She stirs drama to boost ratings," Lena whispered. "And she and Adrian have history." I didn't have time to ask before Raina zeroed in on us, greeting Adrian with a smile too polished to be sincere. "Adrian, darling," she cooed, touching his arm just a second too long. "What brilliance you've created. And who is this?" Her gaze landed on me, sharp as glass. He didn't hesitate. "This is Professor Eleanor Hayes. Her work shaped this entire collection." The look Raina gave me managed to be both gracious and appraising, as though cataloging every insecurity I might have. She whisked Adrian away for an interview, leaving a camera crew framing him like a prize. Lena nudged me gently. "Come with me. Let's get some air." In the quieter second gallery, I tried to lose myself in Adrian's photographs, but my attention kept drifting to the doorway where Raina conducted her interview, leaning close, laughing at nothing, touching his arm again. I hated that my chest tightened. I hated that at 63, jealousy could still ambush me. "You need the roof," Lena said quietly. "Trust me." The January wind was brutal, but the solitude was a relief. I wrapped the borrowed gallery coat tighter around me and let the cold clear my head. "Don't let Raina get under your skin," Lena said, lighting a cigarette. "She revisits old flings whenever she wants attention. It's her pattern. Not his." "I'm being silly," I murmured. "Whatever they were, that was years ago." 16, Lena confirmed. "Ancient history. And irrelevant. I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you." Before I could reply, the door swung open. Adrian emerged, scanning the rooftop until his gaze landed on me. "There you are," he said, coming toward me. "I've been looking everywhere." "Done with your interview?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. "Survived it," he corrected. "She prefers digging up the past to talking about the actual art." Lena took the hint and left us alone. We stood at the railing, the city glittering below as if waiting for our next move. "You're upset," he said softly. "I'm thinking," I countered. "There's a difference." He nodded. "Processing the fact that I've lived a life before this one." I exhaled. "Something like that. Eleanor." He turned fully toward me, his features open, steady. "I've had relationships that ended badly, a few that ended well, and long stretches where it was just me and the work. But none of that is where my life is now. Where I am, is right here." He intertwined his fingers with mine, warm even in the winter wind. "And if you want this, whatever this becomes, I'm all in. Past included, but not invited." For the first time in a long time, my heart didn't wobble with doubt. It steadied. Expanded. Because he wasn't asking me to disappear to fit someone else's story. He was making room for me in his. What I've never had is someone who sees me. The work, yes, but more importantly, the intention behind it. The quiet sincerity in Adrian Cole's voice dissolved the knot of unease that had been tightening in my chest. "I'm not used to feeling territorial," I admitted. It caught me off guard. "If it helps," he murmured, stepping closer, the winter air turning his breath into small clouds, "I find your possessiveness far more appealing than Raina's rehearsed attempts to manufacture it." His nearness warmed me. "So," he asked lightly, "back to the exhibition? Or should we make a discreet exit? I've fulfilled my obligations for the evening." The idea of returning to the crowded gallery, of risking more run-ins with ghosts of his past, felt suffocating. "Escape," I said. "Absolutely." We slipped out through a service door into a quiet street where cabs drifted past in streams of yellow. Adrian hailed one with practiced ease. "Where to?" the driver asked. Adrian looked at me, giving me the choice. And for once, I didn't overthink. "Surprise me." His private smile, the one I was coming to recognize as mine alone, softened his features as he gave the driver an unfamiliar address. When he took my hand, his thumb brushing gentle circles on my palm, my pulse steadied instead of racing. "You never stop surprising me, Eleanor Hayes." "Good," I said, squeezing his hand. "I'm getting better at surprising myself." The taxi carried us away from the gallery, away from Raina Wolf's pointed smiles and sharpened questions, away from the polished persona Adrian wore like tailored armor. What was left was simply us, two people meeting late in life with the clarity to recognize something real when it arrived. My earlier jealousy evaporated. I wasn't competing with Adrian's past. I was part of his present. And for the first time in years, I was fully present in my own life too. The woman who used to quietly accept being excluded, from dinners, decisions, conversations, felt like someone I'd finally outgrown. Chicago greeted me with record snowfall when I returned home, sidewalks swallowed in drifts, trees glazed with ice. Instead of resenting the forced hibernation, I found comfort in it. I spent long hours refining the photographs I'd taken in New York and reflecting on the quiet transformation unfolding in my life. The exhibition reviews were glowing. Critics praised Adrian's exploration of forgotten architecture, noting how he captured the thread between ruin and renewal. Several referenced my insights, my name in print, credited for shaping the theoretical lens behind his work. It startled me every time I saw it. Then came the invitation. A formal request from the Chicago Institute of Art. They wanted me to curate a small exhibition on the intersection of photography and architecture. They wanted to include my work. Over coffee in her office, my old friend Dr. Olivia Tran tapped the letter like it was a student paper in need of revisions. "They want you because your perspective is rare, Eleanor," she said. "Your academic eye gives your photography depth most people can't achieve." Or, I countered uneasily. Adrian nudged them. Olivia sighed. "Even if he mentioned your name, they wouldn't put it in ink unless they respected your work. Take the win." I was learning that taking wins was a muscle I had rarely exercised. After years of quiet self-erasure, making myself small for family harmony, for Mark's comfort, for the sake of avoiding conflict, stepping forward still felt unnatural. "How's Mark?" Olivia asked. "We're better," I admitted. "He's working through things with Cassandra. They're making progress. Still tense, but progress." "And your granddaughter?" The smile that rose was involuntary. "Flourishing. Lily, she wants to learn photography. Mark brings her over every Saturday no matter the weather." "And Cassandra?" "That's the strange part," I said. "It was her idea." Olivia raised a thoughtful brow. "Sometimes people grow when we stop carrying the entire load for them." Her words lingered as I walked home through the snow-hushed campus. Maybe I hadn't reinvented myself. Maybe I'd simply stopped burying the person I'd always been. That evening, Adrian surprised me by arriving in Chicago unannounced. Over dinner, I confessed my fears about the exhibition. "What if this is some kind of late-life panic?" I asked. "A scramble for relevance?" He shook his head. "Crisis is when people run from themselves. What you're doing is running toward yourself." "Reclamation," I said, liking the weight of the word. The next morning, while Adrian showered, I received a message from Cassandra. "Lily is presenting on Important Women next Friday. She wants you there. 2 p.m. Lakeside Elementary. Can you make it?" The text stunned me. Cassandra had never extended an invitation directly, not without edge or obligation. When Adrian came out of the bathroom, toweling his hair, he instantly read my expression. "Well," he said softly, "that's different from Thanksgiving." "I don't know how to respond," I admitted. Part of me wants to decline, just to prove I don't jump at every breadcrumb she offers. And the other part wants to be there. For Lily. "What would the old Eleanor do?" he asked. "Rearrange everything. Show up early. Thank Cassandra too profusely. Make myself small. And the new one. Check my calendar. Go if I can. No apology, no theatrics. Just honesty." He smiled. "Then answer as the woman you're becoming." So I typed. "I'd be honored. I have a meeting until 1:30 but will come straight after. Thank you for letting me know." Direct. Steady. No shrinking. At Lily's presentation, I stood in the back of the classroom, on time, not early, while she spoke proudly in front of her classmates. She introduced me with a picture she'd chosen herself. "This is my grandma, Eleanor. She shows me how to look for beauty in places most people don't notice." Tears pricked my eyes. When I glanced across the room, Cassandra was watching. Her expression, for once, held no judgment. Only something quieter. When the presentation ended, she approached me carefully. "She insisted you be part of it," Cassandra said. "She worked on that section for days." For the first time in our complicated history, her tone wasn't defensive or dismissive. It was almost respectful. And in that moment, I realized how far we had all come. Small invitations, given, withheld, or finally offered, had changed the direction of my life more than any grand event ever had. Eleanor nodded, unsure how to respond to Cassandra's calm, almost clinical tone, neutral on the surface, but heavy with currents she couldn't yet read. "She talks about your photography outings constantly," Cassandra added, voice steady in that controlled way she'd perfected. "Mark says you've sparked a genuine interest. Our walls are covered with her attempts to capture beauty in the most ordinary things." "She has a natural eye," Eleanor answered, keeping her tone even. A quiet strain settled between them until Cassandra abruptly asked, "Would you join us for dinner on Sunday?" "Nothing formal, just family." The invitation landed like a stone dropped into still water, unexpected, sending ripples through Eleanor's thoughts. Was this reconciliation? A test. Some therapist-approved exercise. Overthinking it would only complicate things. I'd like that, she said simply. What time? 6. Mark will text you. Cassandra hesitated, then added with visible effort, Lily would love to show you her redecorated room. She reorganized everything. That evening, on a video call with Adrian, who had flown back to New York for a commercial shoot, Eleanor recounted the strange olive branch. Maybe it's not that deep, he suggested gently. Maybe it's just dinner. Even if it's from Cassandra, the same woman who uninvited you from Thanksgiving. Nothing is ever just anything with her, Eleanor muttered. People change, he reminded. Especially when they're forced to look at the reality they've created. His steadiness cut through her spiraling thoughts. You're right, she sighed. No expectations. Good or bad. Wise woman, he teased, before his voice shifted, soft, almost careful. Speaking of expectations. I have news. Her pulse quickened. What kind of news? The Lisbon project is moving faster than planned. They want me for scouting next week. The shoot will be April through June. That's incredible, she said, and meant it, despite the small ache of knowing what 3 months apart could mean. It would be even better if you came for part of it, he said quietly. Her breath caught. That wasn't a casual suggestion. That was a door, wide open. I have teaching obligations. Your semester ends in early May, he reminded her, not pushing, simply knowing. And you mentioned considering a sabbatical. The fact that he'd remembered that fleeting comment, that he'd been envisioning her in his future even before she had, filled her with a feeling that terrified and warmed her all at once. It's a big step, she murmured. It is, he agreed. Think about it. No rush. But the question lingered long after the call ended. What exactly was she afraid of? Sunday dinner brought no immediate answers. Everything unfolded with a strange, almost scripted normalcy, Lily proudly showing her photo-covered room, Mark manning the grill like a suburban pro, Cassandra cordial but taut, as though holding a fragile new shape. Later, while helping in the kitchen, Cassandra broke the spell. Mark says you might go to Portugal. It's possible, Eleanor replied, drying a plate. 3 months is a long time to be away from family. The old Eleanor, the one who shrank herself to preserve peace, would have rushed to reassure her. But that version of her was becoming harder to summon. It is, she acknowledged. But distance isn't what it used to be. Cassandra set down the wine glass a little too carefully. Lily would miss your Saturday outings. And I'd miss them, Eleanor said honestly. But showing her that I don't limit myself, that might be worth something. Something shifted in Cassandra's expression. A flicker of recognition. Maybe even respect. Our therapist says I have control issues, she said abruptly. That I try to manage everyone's relationships to create some illusion of harmony. She gave a short, brittle laugh. Apparently, forcing people into my idea of harmony isn't the same as actual connection. Change is hard, Eleanor said gently, surprised at how much she meant it. I'm still learning how to take up space without apologizing. You're doing well, Cassandra said, sincere for the first time. Lily sees it. She told her therapist she wants to be brave like you. The word struck Eleanor like a hand pressed to her heart. She has a therapist. We all do, Cassandra admitted. Separately and together. Exhausting, but necessary. After a beat, she added, quieter, I'm sorry about Thanksgiving. It was cruel. It was unnecessary. The apology, unexpected, overdue, left Eleanor momentarily speechless. Thank you, she whispered. If Portugal is what you want, you should go, Cassandra managed. We'll make it work. Maybe visit if you stay long enough. Later, alone at her desk, Eleanor marveled at how far things had shifted since that cold November day she'd been so casually excluded. She'd reclaimed her voice. Found a new creative calling. Fallen into a partnership she hadn't thought possible at her age. And now, impossibly, Cassandra had apologized. She drafted an email to her department chair about arranging a partial sabbatical. Then she texted Adrian. "Lisbon sounds wonderful. Let's talk when you're back." His reply came instantly. "You keep surprising me, Professor Hayes." She smiled. She surprised herself, too. The photo Lily had taken of her hands, wrinkled, steady, poised over her camera, rested framed on her bedside table. Beside it lay the exhibition invitation Lena had sent from Chicago, and the plane ticket for next week's trip to New York. Not bad for someone who'd once accepted being told, "You're not invited." Lisbon in May felt like stepping into another world, sunlight cascading over 7 hills, streets twisting like questions she finally wanted to answer. Eleanor arrived 2 weeks after finishing her semester, stepping into an apartment Adrian had rented in the Alfama district. Thick stone walls. A terrace overlooking the river. Space carved for both of them. Days unfolded with gentle rhythm, mornings exploring narrow streets, afternoons joining Adrian on shoots capturing Portugal's architectural contradictions. Evenings filled with seafood, wine, and conversations that stretched long into the night. "You're lighter here," he said one evening. "Freer." "I think it's because no one here sees me through a role," she replied. "I'm not a professor or mother or grandmother. I'm just here." "Sometimes distance is clarity," he said. Her photography blossomed. Doorways, windows, thresholds. The Lisbon light, golden, sharp, directing her toward possibilities. Lena requested some of the new works for the Chicago exhibition. A Lisbon cultural magazine reached out for an interview. Her connections at home didn't fade. Weekly calls with Lily became ritual, and occasionally, astonishingly, Cassandra texted updates, sometimes small photos of Lily's growing photography club. The only sour note came from Cassandra's aunt, Vivian, who sent Mark a message dripping with judgment about Eleanor running off with a photographer and abandoning family. Mark forwarded it to Eleanor with a simple eye roll emoji. "Ignore. Lily misses you but is filling a whole box to show you when you get home." Eleanor smiled and set her phone down. She no longer lived for anyone's approval, not even Vivian's disapproval. She breathed deeply, certain now, connections worth keeping survived distance. And people willing to grow, herself included, could rewrite their place in the world at any age. Eleanor's morning began inside the cavernous remains of a 17th-century monastery perched on a hill outside Lisbon. Restoration crews moved quietly through the shadows, their work lights casting long beams across ancient stone. Dominic adjusted his camera lens, studying the interplay of old walls and the sleek glass ceiling added during the renovation. "You tell me first," he said, turning toward her. "What's the story in this room?" Eleanor let her eyes travel upward, following the way sunlight fractured through the new panels before spilling down the weathered columns. "A conversation between centuries," she said softly. "The new structure doesn't erase the original, it protects it. The modern elements are humble. Supportive. Almost reverent." Dominic exhaled, as if she had articulated something he'd been struggling to grasp. "That's exactly what's been missing from my earlier shots. I was chasing contrast when I should have been capturing collaboration." Over the past several weeks, their dynamic had shifted. She wasn't just accompanying him out of affection, she was contributing, shaping his work, challenging him intellectually. And he welcomed it. That mutual respect felt startlingly different from the careful balancing act her marriage had once required. That evening, as the sky melted into layers of rose and copper, they sat on the terrace of their rented apartment overlooking the city's red-tiled rooftops. Dominic poured 2 glasses of rich, warm port. "I've been thinking about what comes after this project finishes," he said, his voice quieter than usual. Eleanor felt her pulse quicken. They had deliberately avoided defining their long-term future, two grown adults, both aware of how quickly expectations can turn into boxes. He continued, the Portuguese Tourism Board wants a book on the lesser-traveled regions. It would keep me here another 6 months. That's exciting, she said honestly. A big opportunity. It is. But it brings up arrangements. He paused, choosing his words with care. I don't want to drift back to weeks apart, coordinating time zones, living halfway in each other's lives. She met his gaze. What alternative are you thinking about? Something real. A partnership. Shared home, shared projects, shared days. Not marriage unless it matters to you. Just us, without the constant leaving. It should have felt overwhelming. Instead, it felt like the logical continuation of the choices she'd already begun making, the ones that started on the day she'd been told she wasn't invited to Thanksgiving. I have responsibilities, she murmured. Tenure. Lily. But I also have choices. And I'm not interested in shrinking myself anymore. Dominic's eyes softened. I'm not asking for a decision tonight. Just consider a life that isn't divided into compartments. Eleanor didn't need days of contemplation. At some point in these past months, her trajectory had shifted. I want the same thing, she said. Us, whatever shape we choose. His smile was one she had come to treasure, warm and private. A notification blinked on her phone. A message from Mark, Lily won first place in the school art show. She said she used your trick for finding beauty in forgotten places. We're so proud of her. Eleanor looked out across the glittering river and felt something loosen inside her chest, a sense of belonging that came not from approval, but from alignment. Months later, she found herself standing inside the Chicago Institute of Art as staff made final adjustments for her exhibition opening. Thresholds, perspectives on transition filled 2 full galleries, photographs from Lisbon, Chicago, New York, and smaller towns she'd wandered through over the last year. Architectural doorways, shadowed staircases, windows framing unexpected views, each image reflecting her growing fascination with the spaces between one chapter and the next. Dominic had insisted that her name be front and center on every promotional piece. This is your work, he had said. Your voice. I'm just the guy lucky enough to witness the evolution. An assistant approached. Professor Hayes, your family is here. Eleanor turned just in time to see Mark, Cassandra, and 6-year-old Lily entering the gallery. Behind them walked her closest friend, Lena, and, unexpectedly, Cassandra's mother, Judith. Eleanor stayed perfectly still for a moment, struck by the unlikely combination. A year ago, these same people had been fractured, distant, or in some cases, actively hostile. Lily reached her first, practically launching herself into Eleanor's arms. Grandma, your pictures are in a real museum. Cassandra reminded her about indoor voices, but even she was smiling. Cassandra shook Eleanor's hand gently. Congratulations. The work is, honestly stunning. Thank you for being here, Eleanor said, and meant it. Judith arrived last, her expression stiff but not unfriendly. Quite an accomplishment, she said. It would have been easier to stay home, but I'm glad I didn't. Eleanor nodded politely. I appreciate that. As her family moved through the exhibit, Lily racing between the photographs, Mark reading every description, Cassandra analyzing each composition with surprising focus, Eleanor stood back and watched them, not as someone seeking approval, but as a woman rooted in her own worth. Later, as the gallery filled with critics, collectors, colleagues, and art enthusiasts, she found herself speaking fluently about her work without apology or hesitation. When Dominic arrived, quietly slipping into the exhibition without drawing attention, she felt rather than heard him approach. You did something extraordinary, he said softly. You captured transition itself. She smiled. Thank you for stepping back tonight. I know people wanted to ask you about your own projects. Tonight belongs to you, he replied. I'm just the man admiring the woman he's lucky enough to photograph alongside. Near closing time, Mark pulled her aside. His expression was sincere, almost solemn. Mom. I kept thinking about last Thanksgiving. It's behind us, she said gently. Not for me. I let someone else decide your value. I'm not making that mistake again. She squeezed his hand. We've all learned things this year. That night, in her lakefront condo, the home she'd bought with her own vision and no one's permission, Eleanor and Dominic shared a quiet toast. Happy Thanksgiving, he said. Or maybe, Happy Independence. Eleanor laughed. From unspoken rules, unquestioned expectations, and small roles. Dominic touched his glass to hers. What are you grateful for this year, Professor Hayes? She took her time answering. The invitation I didn't accept. And the invitations I give myself now. They sat together, watching the lights shimmer across Lake Michigan, and she marveled at how a single exclusion had led her to the greatest expansion of her life. Tomorrow, she would host a Thanksgiving dinner in her own home, her table, her menu, her terms. Not begging for a seat, but offering one. The greatest invitation she'd ever accepted, she realized, was the one she extended to herself. Live boldly. Take up space. Choose joy. Thank you for listening. Please leave a comment rating my story from 0 to 10. Subscribe and share it with someone who loves stories like this. Warm regards.